Hi, I'm Nick from VireEngines.com. Today I'm just going to be showing you how to get this flange off and on the engine, and what you might need to think about. As you can see, I've got this engine in build. It's actually going to be a concourse finished Vire 7, which is no expense spared model. And I've got the water pump. I haven't put this on yet at the moment. But what I want to show you is how to get this flange on and off. Now, when it's on, the problem you'll have is two parts. You've got a nut which is 24 millimeters, and you need to take that off, and you've got to pull it off. It may be rusty inside this part and be quite difficult. So to solve those two problems, firstly, when you've got your socket on there, which you'll obviously have a 24mm socket in your toolkit in here, and you'll be putting your wrench on to try and turn it somehow, and the first problem you get is that the thing turns. Now, how to get over that? What I used to do is have a long screwdriver and put it between two studs, but it does actually hit the socket. So what I'd recommend you do is get a crowbar with a rounded end, and you'll find that this can go between two studs, and it avoids the problems of hitting the socket, and that'll come off easily. And the opposite's true. When you tighten this up, you'll need a long bar. Like I've got, this is about 70 centimeters long, and this gives you enough torque to do the nut up tightly. You'll struggle with something with that short, because you really want to get about 50 foot-pounds of torque on that nut when you do it up. So that is how to do up and undo that nut. As I say, that's the key tool which is going to help you. If you're in the boat, you'll find is that you can lock a spanner or a long screwdriver between these studs and onto the hull, because it's on in the boat, and then you've got two hands to use your wrench. So that's a good tip for tightening and loosening too. If you haven't got one of these, then it's probably best that you loosen and tighten that bolt in the boat, because you can block your locking bar against the hull then. So if you're going to take this off, I suggest you do is get or borrow a long-legged puller, and you can drive between these flanges. If you lock it on the flanges and wind the bolt in, it will come off. Now, a little tip is that this bolt, which is inside, the diameter of that is just right for making sure that your centre spindle doesn't slip off this shaft. So what I'd suggest you do is, having removed this nut, put it back on just one turn, and that way it guides the centre of your puller onto the shaft, and then do this up until the shaft is moving off and gets a bit tight, and then take the knot off entirely, and then you can pull it a bit further, and you might use a soft faced hammer to beat this off just the last few millimeters. Okay, so that's the procedure for removing. Bear in mind, under this nut you should have a nice locking washer, just to sort of anti-vibration proof it, and that goes on between. Now, I'm going to put this back on. I've had this professionally painted because it's concourse, but you may not. The important thing to notice is the centre is really shiny and clean all the way round. I use a little Dremel sanding drum to do this, and it means that if this is clean and the shaft is clean, I'm not going to suddenly jam up. If you don't clean this, you'll find as you are tapping it on that it jams up, and you don't want to beat this too hard, because you'll be transferring shock through the shaft and onto the forward drive bearing, which may put flats in the rollers or the race, and that would be bad for the bearing. So if you get that nice and clean before you put it on, you'll find that there's no chance of you damaging the bearings. So what I like to do, make sure this has got a flat face, because if it hasn't, potentially you could get oil weeping through your sleeve. I put a little bit of sealant on here, and that also prevents the seawater, salt air, rusting inside that space. This is one of the reasons they're so stiff to get on, is because they've corroded. The other thing I'd like to show you is this has got a stainless steel bush, which is, if you take that woodruff key out, replaceable. These always rust when they're original because they're not stainless steel. All the engines I rebuild, and you can get this part separately on the website, this is stainless steel, precision engineered. I have this contracted out, and these bushes are made just for the Vire. They're exactly the right length, so you get the right pinch on this. So make sure before you put it together, if you've got access to that, you replace this bush, and if you've replaced the seal as well, even better. So I'm going to put this on, just jiggle it up to find the roughly slot. So I've got that roughly lined up, and then what we can do is we get a suitable drift, which will be our socket. This one's got an extension, and I like to use a soft face hammer for this, and tap it on. As you go, you'll see that that woodruff key may change its angle, but if this pops up, you just have a screwdriver and tap it down again so it's level, okay? Because if it keeps popping up, either you've got the key misaligned or it needs to be reset horizontal. This one seems to be going straight on its own, so it will carry on. And once I've got that 2/3 on, I can use the screw threads. Right, that's nearly there. Now rather than force it, I can see that I've got 2 or 3 threads there already. I'm now going to put on my lock washer and my nut, and this is going to pull the did you see what I did there? I put the nut on my finger and I rotated the shaft. That's now started, and by doing this up manually, it's going to less likely to transfer shocks into the gearbox. And in order to lock that shaft, I'm now going to employ my crowbar, like so. I hope you appreciate me hurting my back view here, because I'm operating at a queer angle to keep the camera viewing this. Once we get home, we need to put some tension on there. So that's getting tight. I can feel that's now starting to crush the shape-proof washer. So I'm going to employ my pry bar, which gives me a lot easier to put torque on. I'm going to lock the studs, push this in between, and I probably need something like a full turn. It's a very fine thread, you'll notice. It's not the same nut that they use on the crankshaft. It's got a coarser thread, metric. This is metric fine, and so by putting about 50 foot-pounds on here, you're putting an incredible amount of pressure. Now I'm done. I haven't gone crazy with that, because the next guy's got to take it off, and my nuts and parts are not rusty like they came off when this engine was originally stripped, so it's not likely to seize up. But I don't want to put so much tension on here that the guy who needs to take this off next, God forbid, will find it nearly impossible. So I've stopped at about 50 foot-pounds. I know that from that. So there we go. Flange is all on and finished. I may just put a bit of grease in there just to protect it from the elements. Not really necessary, but that's the basics of how to remove and take off this flange. Because it's rotating, you need something to lock it with. That's the important thing to know. And if you've got the rubber coupling on there, just while I'm here, you have a rubber coupling and then the rear flange and some nuts. The trick is to stop this rotating when you're trying to spanner off those nuts, is either use a second spanner or a piece of wood blocking between here and here will stop this rotating. Or what I use a socket set on one, and then a separate socket on the second, and if I loosen all three first, then I can take them off. It's a mistake to take one nut off completely when these two are still tight. So you can keep your spanner on with the nut and get all three loose in succession. And the opposite's true of tightening those nuts after you've got the couplings together, is that you can get all three on loose, then tighten up three equally, and then put the final tension on, and then you can either lock by using a block of wood between here and here, or you can use a socket set or a spanner between the hull of the boat and one of these. I'll give you an example. What you could do is you could have the hull of the boat protected possibly by a piece of wood, and you could put a spanner in there against the hull, and that would effectively block it. Or anything, any block of wood you could use, in fact. For instance, this. Say you've got your hull and you put your block of wood here, just on the metal. It's going to prevent that going round. You need something suitable size length for your boat. So there you go, Nick from vireengines.com, and this particular engine, if you're interested in, is going to be finished in about a week. It's one of 3 I've built over the winter. I've got 12 horsepower models. This is a 7. I haven't yet decided if it's going to have the original exhaust, which is in perfect condition, because I've now got stainless steel exhausts, and I'm going to offer it with either option. So if you want the original exhaust, which will need a water lock, or the stainless steel exhaust, which I haven't got here at the moment, is in the storage upstairs, and it gives you a corrosion proof exhaust system as well. So there you go, have a look at my other videos on the channel, and do please visit the shop vireengines.com. Thank you.